You don't need anything specific tonight other than your cushions as usual bits and bobs you might have with you. So come and sit, come on into your space. Just give yourselves that time to arrive here. You know, whatever it's been like, you get into your mat, whether you've had a chilled day and this has kind of just been there with nothing much else around it, or if you've had 4,003 things going on till you get to this point, definitely stop. Give yourself space, give yourself some breathing time. And congratulate yourself on getting to the mat and making this space and making this time. So as you sit here, draw your attention into your space. So starting to just kind of let whatever is going on out there push out a bit, take it further out your awareness best you can. Notice the space you're in and start to come more to your mat space and this space that you are owning and taking up. It often feels to me like I just put like a wee protective bubble around it for me. Even if I'm doing yoga in the kitchen with hubby rattling about around me, you just put this little bubble around the space and it becomes mine and only mine. And then draw your awareness to yourself. How are you coming to this space tonight? However that is, can you welcome it in? Whether it's how you feel physically, energetically, emotionally. How are you? And then draw your attention to your physicality. So noticing the edges of your body, the seat underneath you. Maybe the spine lifting up out the pelvis, out your seat, but not drawing it upwards and feeling like you need to sit tense and upright to be here. And noticing your breath. So noticing the rate of your breath, the quality of your breath. And by that, I just mean, does it feel easy to breathe? Does it feel a little bit stuck? How's your breath? And you might sit just for a few moments noticing the breath. Following the in-breath, following the out-breath. Give us that sense of focus, attention. By following the breath, we are here and present. The mind might wander, but bring it back to the breath. Coming back to here and back to yourself. And then when you're ready, give the shoulders a little bit of a roll, bit of a move. We'll take the hands behind, up on the fingertips, just to put a bit of weight into the hands to lift the chest. Nice. And then doing the opposite, clasping the fingers through, pushing forward and rounding the spine. Maybe taking a breath there. And then lifting back up through the spine, taking a hand to one side, lifting up through the other arm, and taking a side bend. There's not really a side bend in the practice tonight, so we might stay here just for a couple more breaths to give us that sense of reaching out. And then when you're ready, swapping that over to the other side. Lifting up, take the side bend on the other side. A few slightly deeper breaths just to breathe into the side of the ribs, opening the diaphragm. And then lifting up from there, final roll of the shoulders. And then we'll take our first yin pose. So I'm going to mirror you. If you take your left leg and lengthen it out, and then bring your right foot in towards the inside of that left leg somewhere. Okay. And we're going to stay upright just now. So we're going to work into a fold, but stay in that position just now and do your best to be upright but soft, okay? So not kind of hauling yourself up and feeling that it's difficult to sit there. Let the spine be soft and upright. And get a sense of where your sitting bones are underneath you. Just a kind of gentle sense. And from there, we're going to fold forward. How easy can you go forward? How little do you need to go forward until you feel some sensation, a sense of stretch, however you describe that to yourself. It might be in the outside of the right hip, the back of the left leg, the lower back. Could be anywhere, might be those kind of areas. And just come into the very, very beginning of that stretch. Be more in the middle than over the left leg. And this is where we'll begin the pose from. So we'll take slightly longer than this than usual, just an extra minute. We'll take 6 minutes. If you need to come out of it sooner, then come out. Can you be curious about your sitting bones? Noticing if you drift much more to one, and coming back to steady onto both sides of your pelvis with your sitting bones. And folding more center to begin with. It's asymmetric because one hip's rotating out, and the other one is settled forward. And doing your best to find a place where the shoulder blades can drop away from the spine. The arms can relax. The spine's holding you up and folding forward. And always doing what you need to do to look after yourself. So if you find it's too much here, you come out of it sooner. If you find you need to prop with, for example, a cushion under your knee, or sitting on cushions, or you need to come out of it, sit up for a bit, and maybe go back into it. Really, really listen. And if it becomes too much, I know for certainly a couple of you, it can become challenging sitting up in this. You can always lie back and take this reclining. Rather than the spine folding forward, it's supported on the floor, and we focus on the right hip opening. Maybe there's a sense that the in-breath creates a little bit of length through the spine. So that sense of it kind of energetically rising up out the pelvis, but not as hauling it up, demanding it's more upright or somehow straighter. Sense of the reach. Somebody described it to me like if you see a really healthy fern or flower with raindrops on it, it kind of bends, but with integrity and with a real kind of strength. Whereas when they start to kind of lose that integrity or they start to wither, then it's much more a collapse if rain sits on it. I thought it was a really nice way of thinking of the spine. You might decide to do this now. You might gradually kind of find your way over the next few minutes with it. Can you gently bring a little bit more over the left leg? So we're not hauling our way around to it, but just a little bit of a turn towards that left and folding there. Notice what you notice. The sensations might change. And maybe just play with that over the next couple of minutes to eventually just nudging it a little bit at a time until you know you're as far over that left leg as you can. And by that, I mean in terms of towards it, not folding down to it. So where we started in the middle of the two legs, bringing the torso, the chest, more towards the left leg. And stopping and breathing. If you find that you feel like you're kind of hauling or holding or jamming down somewhere to get over to that left leg, come back more to the center and see how that feels. Maybe that's where you stay. Maybe there is a little bit more lean towards the left as you stay there. Never forcing it. And we're still as best we can be over two sitting bones rather than dropping into one. Just playing with how that is for you to have that bit of focus and attention with it. We'll stay here for around another minute, just as a guide. You guys all know that if that becomes too much, you come out of it. And equally, if it feels like there's something interesting going on, when I give you that heads up that's ending towards the time that I've suggested, then stay. Stay until that interest, curiosity, unwinding, whatever it is, fades away. And then you know it's the right time to come out of the pose. We're always meeting our own needs. We're always meeting ourselves, really, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You be you, I'll be me. And if we meet, it's a beautiful thing. You might stay for another couple of breaths if you're still in the pose, maybe a few more. When you're ready to, you'll take your time, walking your way back up, bringing the feet to the floor and maybe taking a few windscreen wipers. Okay. A little bit of movement to let that just ease out, ebb away. Couple more. We are going to do the other side, but before we get there, we're going to come to lie on our back. Okay. So when you're ready, come and lie on your back. And just give yourself some time to be there. And we'll take the feet a wee bit wider than the hips, maybe more kind of to mat width-ish if you've got a mat there. And then when you're ready, you're going to drop the knees towards the left. So the knees are apart. You're going to find that one knee drops out and one knee seems to kind of drop inwards. It's like the windscreen wipers have just kind of dropped inwards. And just see how that feels for you. Okay, so it might feel really interesting. You like it there. You might feel there's something needed. So that might be a cushion or prop underneath that right knee to give it a bit of support so it's not hanging. It might be underneath the left or both. You're feeling if there's some support you need. So I definitely need a bit of propping up under that right, or it kind of grates onto my joint a wee bit. So, and if you are a bit challenged through the SI joints, just see how you go with this. If it feels too much, you can take a reclining diamond with both knees open, which is a bit more symmetric. It might be a little bit easier on the SI joints. We'll stay here for around 5 minutes. Again, just as a guide. So we're bringing the right hip inwards now. Feeling a different sensation through the hips maybe, the outside edge of the waist. You might feel it across the chest, the arms are open. Staying with this to feel how it is for you. Using the breath for focus. And also using the breath for awareness. If you've come into this and once I mentioned breath, you noticed you were holding your breath. I'm going to let your breath go and just breathe, please. But let that breath be there. So if we come into a place where we feel like we've shortened or holding the breath, then we're just staying in tension in the pose. We want a nice steady breath, fluid breath. Doesn't need to be spacious, but more so steady. It might become spacious as we stay here. We'll find that steady breath. where we can steady into the pose. And we can steady into ourselves. Maybe you can feel a bit of softening on the left outside edge of the hip, the pelvis. Softening into the floor. Which might create a bit more support for the right hip and thigh if it needs it. Again, I'm going to give you a little choice through this pose, only if it feels interesting. With the right arm, it's out to the side now. You might gradually bring it a little bit further up. Might feel nice straight away to kind of bring it up overhead, but I know for me, it's kind of like a little bit at a time, getting that sense that it's going to come more upward out the torso than out to the side. You might just play with that over the next couple of minutes, bringing it a little bit further up, waiting. If that becomes too much to focus on, if there's more interest down at the hips, then just let the arm be where you want it to be. All just suggestions. If you do find interest in moving the arm, a little bit at a time, re-tucking the shoulder to the floor. And just open a bit more at the side of the waist. The connections up from the pelvis, up into the shoulders. All the muscles that support our torso when we're sitting up and standing up. You might want a bit of space and a bit of lengthening. You also might not, so feel free to just ignore anything in the upper body in terms of focusing on it in the shape. And checking in again with that steady breath. Every so often, maybe just a slightly bigger breath, expansion, and finding maybe a sense of release on the out breath, maybe even a sense of relief on the out breath. You might stay here for another 3 or 4 breaths if you're still in the pose. Maybe you've decided that there's something really good about being here and you want to linger longer. Whenever it is that you come out, take your time. If the arms overhead or out a bit more to the side, bring that down, let it settle back. And then take your time rolling onto the back of the pelvis, finding the knees back to the center. And you might take just a little bit of gentle windscreen wipering to feel that both hips are getting a little bit of movement now. You might hug the knees in or straighten the legs out. And it might feel nice if you tend to get a little bit twisted in the pelvis to push into the knees and push the knees in towards you, just to get a little bit of, there's my legs back as a pair, before you hug the knees or lengthen them out. And then we will come back to this side again, but before we do it, we're going to sit upwards again. So take your time. If there's more movement to be had, if you want to come up to all fours and cat-cow, then go ahead and do it. Come into sit when you're ready. And we'll take that forward fold on the other side. So this, when you're ready, the left foot will come towards the inside of the right. And again, we'll take that time sitting upwards, being there without Even thinking about a fold forward, getting a sense of our sitting bones, the spine being soft but upright, and maybe like that sense of the stem of a flower or a fern. And then at some point when it feels the right time for you, folding forward, and again coming into that very beginning edge of the fold. Almost like, how little do I need to fold before I feel some sensations of stretch, reach, and then wait and begin your pose from there. So as you stay, you might fold forward more. You might just enjoy staying where you are and feeling sensations shift and change and release. Then coming into that place that's a bit more centered from both sitting bones. Or if your left leg was lengthened out as well, you'd be in the middle of them roughly, the two legs. And staying here for a couple of minutes with it like this. Again, if you need to come out at any point, sit up, come back to it, and listen to that. Find your own way, your own process. This feels right for you. And finding that steady breath, really noticing it, becoming aware of a steadiness there. Noticing what you notice. Feeling what you feel. And listening to whatever this pose has to tell you. Physically, emotionally, energetically. There's a place for truly listening to your body. See if you can let the shoulder blades fall away from the spine. The arms have a softness to them. You might be very happy where you are. You want to stay there. Or you might be curious again by that little coming off center towards the right leg. Casually looking towards it a little bit more. We think about where we were, it's been 12 o'clock on the clock, coming round towards 1, maybe gradually finding our way towards 2 over time. To bring the fold a little bit more over that right leg. Again, not forcing it. It's almost like you're kind of swaying round from the waist. The shoulders probably want to get involved at hauling you round. You get a sense that somehow it's coming a bit more from the waist, the lower ribs, up through the shoulders and the top of the spine. Again, finding your own process. You might not fold over that right leg. You might fold there quite quickly and that feels right for you. Certainly not having that the outcome needs to be you're folded over that right leg. And it's about meeting that beginning of the edge. Just gently expanding it. And then there's that steady breath. Come back to. Might stay here for another minute-ish. And just as a suggestion, if the idea of another minute for you here seems horrific, that's probably a sign that you want to come out it sooner. If it feels like the time's gone quickly, and you might not be ready to come out in the next 5 or 6 breaths, and stay for longer. Again, listen into that. There might be another 2 or 3 breaths here before you gradually find your way out of the pose. Take it slowly, take yourself upward. And again, once you get there, bend in the knees, maybe for a few windscreen wipers. Knowing that we're going to come back down to lie on our back again, you might decide to go straight there. That feels much more what you need. Again, just go your own pace, make the transition between yours. When you do come down, give your spine space to be there. Let it settle before we even think about where we're going to go with the pose. And then there might be a few wee windscreen wipers, or a reach out the legs, or a hug into the knees, whatever you need here. And then just when you're ready, you'll take the feet wider again than the hips. And this time the legs will come over, the knees will come over towards the right. And again, once you're there, just take your time to feel where the legs and the knees want to go. Do you need that support underneath the left knee or the outside of the right hip? I know I do. It feels like something's hanging, give it some support. And we'll start again with the arms out to the side if that feels comfy for you. We really give the hips that time to begin with. To settle there, to find their way. To let the breath steady into this shape now. As the pelvis gets some support, maybe there's a bit of a softening in the tummy, a sense of not needing to hold yourself up the same. And letting the floor support your spine, support the pelvis, the shoulders. Giving those muscles that hold us up some softening. And then a little bit of time out. There might be a sense that the outside of the right hip, that right side of the pelvis where it's got contact with the floor, can soften into it. We soften the muscles, they don't become weak, they don't become floppy. We simply do some rest, which they need as much as tension. And it's not tension in muscles that creates pain. Our muscles need to be in tension. They also need to rest out. It's when they don't get that rest out, contract and relax, but they just get tension all the time. That's where we start to feel the impact, the pain, the tightness. Our muscles need that time to relax in order to keep us strong, keep us healthy. And like we did on the other side, with that left arm, it might be interesting over the next couple of minutes to gradually take it a bit higher. If you're doing that, you probably want to lift the arm up, reset the shoulder and let it soften, rather than just swinging it round. There's a sense of the shoulder blade resting on the floor and the arm extending out of it. Again, if that's either too much to focus on, the attention is down at the hips, the thighs, that lower body, the abdomen. If that feels more where you're drawn to, and you almost kind of resent the focus on the upper arm, then just don't do it. Let the arm be where it wants to be. Always just suggestions with me. I absolutely do not have the right answers for you. I've just got to experience my own practice and seeing things that have been helpful in other people's practices. There is no right and wrong. What's right for one isn't right for another. Really trust your process. Trust what your body's telling you. And trust yourself. I had a theme this week of saying to people, it sounds like you don't trust yourself. I don't think it's just this week. Sometimes it can feel challenging to trust yourself. You absolutely do know you better than anybody else. You might stay here for another 3 or 4 breaths, kind of noticing how that feels for you, sounds to you. Give yourself time. And when you do come out of it again, come out slowly, come out gently. The arms overhead, bring that down, or bring the arms in. And then gentle roll onto the back of the waist, the back of the hips, to bring the knees in. And again, just feel, what do you need here? If the knees, feet come in a bit, do you need to pull the knees in or stretch them out? Is it a bit of windscreen wiper in, a bit of massage onto the back of the pelvis? Again, maybe if things feel really kind of asymmetric, there's a bit of a push into the knees pushing into the hands, just to feel both legs there, connecting in with the torso, and then seeing if there's some movement that feels helpful after that. And then just so you know where you're coming to when you're ready, we're going to come to all fours. Take your time getting there. There's no rush. And once you get there, notice being there. We're not rushing into the next pose. We're letting the arms take a bit of weight. The kneecaps take a bit of weight. Coming into a more balanced position, a less asymmetric. All the poses so far have been asymmetric. Just letting yourself feel those 4 limbs. And then from there, gently walk the hands forward, coming into melting heart, and finding the kind of right, that Goldilocks place for you. So maybe the hips start over the knees, but actually it feels too much and you need to drop the hips back a little bit. Or maybe you really enjoy the hips being up above the knees and weighting down towards the breastbone. Kind of find that perfect place for you, not too much back that it becomes child's pose. And it might be not so far forward that it feels like the top half of you is just being pushed down and you're holding on with tension. Place where you can settle into this more symmetrical pose after the asymmetric ones. Again, I'm going to give you a little option here as we stay here, but for now, just be here. That's all you need to know. It might be that you choose not to take the option. Again, in the same way that if it just feels like where you are suits you, then that's your sign to stay there. For now, just being here, breathing, finding the steady breath, and letting the yin do the yin. Here we are in this place where the hips are higher than the breastbone. So again, where we've probably spent most of our day upright, be that sitting or standing. We're letting the spine do the opposite. Letting the hips be higher, the heart lower. Give into gravity a bit. And shift the relationship from the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. We're asking the diaphragm to support us a bit more here. It can be sometimes where the upper body might create a bit of tension. So maybe that slightly deeper breath and out breath can help us settle. Again, if you are where you are and it feels just right for you, stay there. If it sounds like it might be interesting, bring the right arm, thread it under the left, but not twisting, more just kind of creating a little bit of pressure into that right shoulder blade, right arm. You'll know if you come into it, if it's where you want to stay or not. If it suddenly feels way more difficult, the brain's got to work and you can't settle, then place the arm back where it was. We'll just stay here for about a minute if you do enjoy it. You might find that the forehead comes to the floor, or you bring weight more to that right side of your face. Again, finding somewhere you can settle if you come into this. It's just an option. You do you. Again, if you have taken that option and it feels really interesting here, stay here. You might decide to bring it back a little bit more symmetric again, letting that arm reach out and see how that feels. You might do that for a few breaths before changing it over and then bringing the left arm through, just like you did with the right. And just because you did it on one side, if you did, doesn't mean you have to do it on the other. You might get there and for some reason it doesn't feel quite right. Maybe you love it. And absolutely feel free to just let me melt into the background and ignore it all if you are quite happy where you are. Again, you want to find a place that's steady, where you can be still and settle into that. You might stay with the left arm there for another couple of breaths before once again bringing it out, coming back a bit more symmetric, both arms reaching. And then wherever you are, whether you've taken the option or not, perhaps another 2 or 3 breaths here before coming out of this pose and coming back up to all fours and taking some cat cows. Giving the arms just a bit of weight. You're coming into a cat stretch. So coming into kind of the complete opposite might feel really nice. Bit of movement there. And always come up to your knees, roll your shoulders. And just kind of anything goes in terms of what it feels like would be useful for you. You might come and lie in your tummy and let the bones have a bit of a shiggle. And just so you know where we're going for when you're ready to get there, we're going to take a child's pose, knees together, arms at the side. So really letting us come into rounding that spine. Now, if it's been too much in that position on your knees, if your knees have found it a bit more challenging, you can come and roll onto your back and hug your knees instead. It's the same thing, just different. Okay. So simply for if it just feels like too much effort to be more upwards in child's pose, come and lie on your back. So this next pose, child's pose, and the focus we want here is the rounding of the spine, the shoulder blades falling away from each other, a complete counter to where we've been. So the arms don't have to do effort. You get to curl inwards. The spine's not reaching out. And there's a bit more balance between the tailbone and the breastbone, the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. Coming into a little bit more balance. It's always okay if child's pose is challenging for you. I know some people love it, some people dread it. If you're in the latter, always the option to come and do it on your back. Be a little bit more accessible. And a nice steady breath there to follow. Notice what you notice. Feel what you feel. And listen to what there is here to hear. Listening to your body. Whatever it needs from you. Nice and steady. And there might be the odd slightly bigger breath and the sigh or the extended out breath. Using that breath for expansion, a bit of release, or for focus. place to come back to anytime you need. And we might take another 2 or 3 breaths here if that feels enough for you. You know the story now. Stay as long as you need. When you do come out of this one, take your time. You might kind of come up to your elbows, give yourself a bit of time there, then up to all fours. Bit of movement there. You shiggle of the hips, anything you need. And just knowing that when you have done some movement here, we're going to come and sit. We're going to do one more seated pose before we come to lie. So you might come to sit, and I quite like sometimes taking a bit of a kind of seated cat-cow, just to let myself feel a bit of movement through the spine in a different way. Again, just so you know where we're going, with this pose, we're going to take the soles of the feet together and the knees outward. Okay. And again, give yourself time being there. Let's not just rush into the fold. Give yourself time to be upright, letting the hips open. If they need cushions, which mine are definitely going to need tonight, then you might plop them into the side, the thighs, there might be a couple on each side. And kind of looking for how far forward can your feet go to be in that diamond. So in yin, we're not looking for them to come right up to the pelvis. We want to give ourselves a bit more space there to fold. And then over time, we gradually finding a bit of fold from the torso, from the hips. So there's no rush to reach out through the arms. There's more a sense of, again, that spine being up, folding. Nice. And if it is challenging for you to sit in this position, I know for me it was for a long time, there's always the option of sitting against something, supporting the spine and letting the hips open. Yeah. Yourself come into this diamond. Steady breath. Once again, steadying into it. We've been quite asymmetric in the hips up till now. Starting to steady them off in the last couple of poses. And here's a place where we can let them open. Let the spine fold. Feeling our way through the center. Might be a sense of your breastbone being in the center of that shape, if that's helpful. Nice and steady. Feeling your way through it. Feeling the sensations as they shift. And feeling the shape as it evolves as you stay here. And maybe being aware of a gentle edge rather than a hard outcome, a focused outcome. Being at a gentle edge and expanding from there. Even though there's the yin's about being still, still a sense of movement. Finding that gentle edge and moving from there within the stillness. And maybe you can let the shoulder blades drop away from each other. And the arms find a place where you don't need to strive, you don't need to reach. You don't need to be busy here. And perhaps we'll take another minute here. Maybe just noticing how that sounds. Delightful, hellish, or anywhere in between that. Maybe it feels quite neutral. Just lets you know you're in this place of just being in the process. Simply being here, breath by breath. There might be another 2 or 3 breaths here before you come out of it. Maybe a few less, a few more, or a couple less. Taking your time when you're ready to come on out of it. Lifting up through the spine. You might want to take one leg out at a time. Give them a little shuggle. You might bend them and windscreen wiper them. It might be nice to just bring a bit of weight back into the arms and let the spine be slightly different from where it was. Anything you feel you need here. And also knowing that our next pose is going to be down on our back. So you might decide to find your way there. Then once you're there, it might be nice to hug the knees. You might stretch them out. You might reach the arms out, and that feels really good. As if you windscreen wipers. Give yourself time simply to be here, to wait, and to find any movement that feels right for you. And that might well be, oh, I'm just glad to lie on my back now, which is movement in itself. You'll still be breathing. And again, so you know where you're going here. We're going to bend the knees and we're going to draw them in. Hook in at the backs of the knees. And if it feels okay, letting the knees open. I'm aware they've been open in the last pose. So if that feels too much, then create a little cradle around the knees with both arms. We're not going to be here for long. We're not going to be here 5 minutes, probably just a couple. Whichever one feels the right one for you. I know for me, it may need a little bit of cradling, a little bit of togetherness. But if you enjoy that feeling of the hips opening, the pelvis opening, then absolutely go there. It's kind of the final little focus into the hips. Nice and steady again. And maybe wherever you are here with the knees, the hands holding, somehow kind of scooping the knees, can you let the shoulder blades drop heavy? So not pulling them back, but just letting them settle to the floor. As if they're falling away from the back of the body. Maybe a sense of the elbows being a little bit heavy. And we take just about another minute here. Nice and steady here. Maybe another 2 or 3 breaths. Absolutely knowing you can stay for longer if that's what you want. And when you do come out of this, bringing the knees in if they're wide, bringing the feet to the floor. You might want to lift the hips up and reset them. There might be a bit of movement through the hips. Maybe you just kind of like having a bit of stillness for a moment or two. Maybe there's a nice big sigh, or maybe that's just me. And then our next pose, we're going to need one of the cushions for. So again, just so you know where you're coming. Not done this one for a while. We're going to take one cushion underneath the back of the body. So our hips aren't on it and our head's not on it. So we're getting a bit of curve through the spine. Kind of back of waist, lower ribs, bringing that cushion there. If you find that your head feels like it's rolling back quite a lot, then pop a cushion under your head as well. And then you're going to find where you want your legs here. So for me, I suspect they're probably going to stay bent. You might want that too. They might prefer to lengthen out. Well, actually, that does feel quite nice. You might like them being bent, but want to roll them in so they get a bit of support from each other. Just kind of take a few moments to feel where do you want your legs here? They're just going to be there. There's no particular focus on them now. And then we're going to take the arms and we're going to hold the left hand onto the right elbow. And how does it feel to bring that, actually hold, if you can, both elbows to each elbow and bring them overhead. If you can't get the right hand to the left elbow, then just let that be where it drops. A little bit of sensation into that right elbow of the left hand. Maybe a little bit of stretch into the top of the arm. So if that feels really convoluted, you can't find a still place, you might need a cushion underneath the elbows. Maybe it's just a little bit too much hanging in the air. If you still can't find it, then maybe bring the elbows out a bit wider and just have them about shoulder width. And that'll give a bit more space maybe for the shoulder blades. Letting the hands, elbows come that bit higher. Maybe a little bit more stimulation onto that right upper arm than the left. Not quite a tricep stretch. Noticing what you notice here. If anything starts to become too much, you simply ease back and find your version. Maybe the arms do just come out to the side of the body. You don't need something extra added in. Maybe they quite like it though. Might be another breath or two here. And then you bring the arms out to the side again. and let them open and rest. Stay here for a few breaths, the place between. And then you might again take the arms overhead. This time the right hand's coming to the left elbow. Finding where the left hand's going to go. There might be just a subtle sensation into the left upper arm, elbow, a little bit of stretch. But again, not at the sake of adding intention. It means you have to super concentrate, focus, the breath shortened, any of that stuff. If you can come to it with curiosity and interest, great. If you come to it with analysis and head hurting, then go somewhere easier. The difference between focus and concentration. Maybe we look for a gentle focus without it dipping into concentration, which feels much more a mental process. Again, there's maybe another breath or two here. And then we take the arms out wide again and stay there the last minute of the pose. Nice and steady. You can feel the arms really giving to the ground, sense of the arm bones resting, particularly after where they've just been. You might stay here for another couple of breaths. You do come out of here, just let the arms slide in a little bit to the body, roll to one side, take the cushion away, and then let yourself come onto your back and feel the spine settle. And just feel again where the legs want to be to let that happen. Take a couple of breaths here just to let the spine settle back. And again, if there's some movement you want to do, maybe a bit windscreen wipering, maybe the arms need to move after that. Feel what's needed. And then we're going to come to just a little pre-Shavasana. So taking a cushion, a pillow, or a couple of cushions or pillows, and you're simply going to pop them at the back of the knees, bit of softness at the back of the legs, and let the legs settle over them. And then letting the arms come to wherever the arms come to. The feet might flop out slightly, or they might flop in if that's the way that your anatomy works. Letting the legs just really rest over the cushions there. We'll just take a couple of minutes here. Letting the deep hip flexors have some quiet time, some rest. Letting the back of the body settle back to the floor after the last one. And letting the shoulder blades rest. And the arms. Maybe not so much feelings of stretch here. Maybe there's a sense of releasing, quieting, softening. Noticing those types of sensations instead. Nice and steady. Much more stillness here. Yet still the breath moves. Still the organs work. The fluids move. And the body continues to support us. It's when we give it rest like this that we can really give the organs time to just do what they do without having to do everything else at the same time. A bit of peace and quiet. Now, this might be your Shavasana. You might decide that this is where you want to take the last few minutes of the practice. It might be kind of like this, not quite. Maybe you want to go and get some layers or pop a light off. Maybe there's a completely different place for you to find Shavasana. Again, come into a place where it's much more restful. Muscles aren't particularly having to support you. And somewhere we can just integrate everything from the last hour and a bit. Time for quiet. A time for, definitely, for me to be quiet and give you that space. Once you settle in, you might take a couple of slightly bigger breaths. Letting the out breath sigh away. And then I'll meet you in a few minutes again where we can complete the practice together. And if this place of quiet and doing less is what you need, then stay for longer. It's the beauty of doing it online. You can stay as long as you need in your house there. If it does feel for you that practice can come to a close, then take your time, come into a place that feels the right position to do that from. That might be seated, it might simply be just a different version of lying down. Give yourself to get there and then time to be there. And just letting yourself acknowledge that practice is coming to a close. The practice always comes off the mat with us in one way, shape, or other. Maybe as you sit there, you just take a moment to notice how you are now, how you feel after that, physically, energetically, emotionally. Is there anything that you want to kind of particularly notice, breathe in, embody into you to take off the mat with you? I think it's almost that taking the intention off the mat rather than when we sometimes come to the start of it and make an intention. And then when you're ready, you let the shoulders take a bit of a roll, it's a bit of movement. You might take just a little bit of a twist, or there might be a side bend. If there's a last little bit of movement to be had, take it. Might be nothing, you might be quite happy there. And bring your hands to heart center when you're ready. For that very, very important part of the practice where you thank yourself for coming to practice. And hopefully you thank yourself for being you. I'm going to thank you for being you. Namaste.